Hello, everybody. Rob Mazak here. I am coming to you from Austin, Texas on Wednesday, May 8th in the evening time. I hope the sound quality is a little bit better here in this location. I was staying down in Crystal City for a while on my mission, my military mission, but I have been moved up to Austin. Now I'm staying in a room that, is a little bit quieter, carpet on the floor, things like that, versus a hunting lodge at the last place. So I hope the quality is a bit better here. If you listened to some of my stuff before, you'll know that I just kind of work off the cuff with a specific topic to start with and kind of see how it rolls out. And tonight I wanted to talk about synchronicities. And synchronicities are very interesting, and I do believe there's a difference between synchronicities and coincidences. And I'm going to read the definitions as far as the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines them, and we'll see if we can kind of break that apart. Then I'll talk about some of my own meanings and part of the reason why I am talking about this. So if you look at the definition of coincidences or coincidence, based on the Merriam-Webster dictionary, as we promised, that definition reads as such: the occurrence of events that happen at the same time by accident but seem to have some connection. And in a lot of other definitions, and in my own definition, it's sort of like there's something that caused something to happen. There should be some kind of causal part of that equation, which means, cause and effect, which means something happened which created something else in a lot of ways. And they seem like they're accidental, and that's kind of what that definition means in every other definition that I can find. But when you look at synchronicities, it's a little bit different. And that reads in the Merriam-Webster dictionary as this definition: the coincidental occurrence of events, and especially psychic events, that seem related but are not explained by conventional mechanisms of causality. This was especially used by Carl Jung, who's a really interesting psychologist, philosopher from a while back. I don't know his exact history on his dates and all that kind of stuff, but he is kind of like my understanding, like the father of psychology. In a lot of ways. I think that's one of the terms that people use to describe him. And I also think that synchronicity is kind of something that's also loosely defined, or at least defined by myself, as something that's kind of written into the fabric of our reality or our path in this life. We do come into this life, in my opinion, in successive lifetimes. Over and over. Reincarnation is the main term that most people use. Either way, when we come in here, synchronicity would basically state that it's more deterministic, the life that we're living, meaning that we came in here with a script and that it's playing out, and that the synchronicity only feels like a coincidence because it just seems to happen out of the blue. But somewhere in the background, however you want to look at that, there's some other things at play. And this could very well be, the things we've talked about before: spirit guides, could be God, or anything divine that's acting behind the scenes to create things that help us get our attention, drive us in a certain direction, help us out along the path that we're supposed to be on. Coincidences to me are just simply something that just does happen. And there is very slight differences in definitions between the two, but we'll stick with synchronicity here in the light, or the argument that these are something that's either predetermined or is determined by a force that's here for our benefit. Most ways, I should say. I guess it wouldn't always work that way. But primarily, in my life at least, synchronicities have always played out well for me. they've always helped me move along and get me to pay attention to something that I wasn't paying attention to before. But the thing about synchronicities, before we move on, or coincidences or anything like that, if we don't learn to pay attention to what's going on around us and look for those types of things to happen, we're not gonna notice very many of them. In my opinion, in my experience, we are being reached out to some type of communication in many different ways by the spiritual realm, the other side. We'll call them divine beings for this particular podcast. So divine beings, those beings that exist outside of this reality, as we know our experience as humans. So something other than that. And I do believe that they're here for our benefit. They're assigned to us, and they're trying to provide a message and a direction without any direct interference. That kind of goes back to the old Star Trek thing, right? When they were driving through space and they're going, finding these worlds that were very primitive, and they were, it would be very tempting to want to help them with their evolution, providing them tools and learning fire and different crafts. In that particular movie of Star Trek, it was always played out that they had a non-interference clause. And if you look at many of the things like the Galactic Council and all these other entities and councils and groups outside of this reality, it has been talked about quite a bit through many of my clients and the folks that I watch that are channelers, myself, my clients. That's the same for the divine beings as well. That they're not supposed to have any direct influence on us. In other words, not just traipse in, give us a message, show us some things. So what they do then, if that's the case, which I do believe it is that they try to give us these subtle little hints, these signs, these things that help us go, I wonder what that's about. It will cause us to do some research, hopefully, to look it up, to talk to some people, to try to figure out what it is that we are being told. And in my experience as a medium, for example, a lot of the entities that come through like to play Pictionary with me. And so I've had to, over the years, learn what the symbology of different things are and some standard meanings, like the way they're facing, how much of their former body they're showing me. All those kind of things really play out. Don't get me wrong, there's probably close to 50% of the time I'm getting direct messages, but there's those times that they just simply will stare at you and hold up symbols or show you things that doesn't necessarily make sense to you, but might to the client. The reason for discussing that to begin with was the fact that I've had to really to go in and understand what symbology means, at least for what I accept as different meanings of symbols. Because symbology, if you go on the internet and you search up something from a dream, about driving your car, you could find, thousands of definitions or ideas about what that means. And so once you settle on what it mostly means for you, as you've heard me talk about before, you develop a common language between you and your assigned divine being. And so then you can really understand what you're getting and understand what the message might be without having to struggle or think about it. So basically you're developing a different language, a spiritual language is probably a good way to look at it. And all through my life, I felt like, to be honest, that my life has been playing out just like it should, almost like it's written in excruciating detail. And I'm not saying that's that way for everybody, but I've also been told that in some really deep meditation journeys that my soul, my spirit is so detail-oriented that it planned out every stinking detail of this life. So I just need to learn to love how it sucks. And I've kind of adopted that. And, of course, I know that I have a conscious part of my mind that I can choose otherwise if I want. However, I have settled into the fact that I'm on a journey. And I've even said that to myself many times over the course of my life. It feels like I'm just on a ride. I'm just here. Things just seem to happen. Things kind of go like they should. Don't have to struggle for things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, like a millionaire. There's always some struggles, correct? I mean, it wouldn't be worth having a human life without some kind of trial. Anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought there. So synchronicities in my life, once again, pop up all the time, and I've learned to pay attention to it. And we can look at that as a term called mindfulness. And there's a lot of definitions for that too. But in my book, my definition book, mindfulness means it's sort of like meditation, but mindfulness really talks about paying attention to the now, what is happening right now, not worrying about what happened before in the past, not worrying about what's going to happen in the future. I'm not saying we shouldn't plan or learn from the past. What I'm saying is that the only time we have really is right in this instant. The instant, from instant to instant, and second to second, and probably even less time than that. Because the past is not coming back, and the future is not here, it's not guaranteed. So the only thing we can actually experience is the now. And so mindfulness is very important. But once again, if all you're doing is minding the now, then you fail to plan and your finances go to crap. And if you haven't dug into your past to learn how to move forward, not good either. But there are times and there are places where you should take some time to be mindful of what's going on right now. Because once again, like I said, that is it. That's all we have. Clients come to me a lot when they talk about repeating patterns and numbers, and I've seen butterflies, white butterflies every day, all the time. And what I also find is that if you don't take the time to learn what that message is, you're going to keep getting that message until you actually figure it out. That's the same with dreams. A lot of times people have recurring dreams over and over and over. They talk to me about it a lot, and I know the answer now is the reason that you've been given that message or that dream over and over is that it's important enough for them that your divine being, your assigned divine being, to show you that over and over until you get it, so that you actually understand what the message is. It must be pretty important. Otherwise, it wouldn't keep happening. In my life, it's happened quite often. There was times when I used to see sequences of numbers over and over, like 723. I used to see that a lot, and it was related to an incident, in my younger life. The sequence of numbers 5723, I have talked about before, but it showed up in a dream, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 years ago now. And it was repeated over and over and over in that dream. And so I decided it was important. So I did the research, I wrote it down, I kept it, and it still shows up even now in different synchronicities, different times where it's needed for me to pay attention to that number. And so what really brought me to this topic today was I've been on military mission for exactly a year now, and down, doing Texas border stuff, not necessarily on the border, but supporting it. And I've been moving all over the place, everywhere but home or close to it. And I was given the opportunity to move up here to Austin, and I was really wavering on that. And I kept getting into my own carnal self about that decision. I had a couple of my students, do some readings for me to see where I got, and they kept saying I need to come here. But it seemed really difficult for me to want to come up here. I don't know why. And, I'm sure there's reasons for that. We don't always like to get out of our comfort zone, something you've been doing for a year. Now you got to go back into something you did, 4 years ago. And, we're probably way behind, and there's a lot to learn, and it's going to be stressful, and you're going to be right next to the flagpole with all the generals and the staff and the brass. I was wondering, I was really struggling with that, and I almost changed my mind and stayed out in the field, which would have been fine too, I'm sure. And today I realized something, and I can't remember exactly how I put the synchronicity together. But I was talking to my wife on the phone today, and this thought popped in my mind. I says, remind me again, our post office box we have for the business is 505 as the number part of it, right? She said, yes, it is. And I said, well, you'll never guess what my room number is here. It is 505. And there's a lot of ways to take that. But in my mind, that justifies a couple of things. It talks about a couple of things for me. One, meaning I'm exactly where I should be, doing exactly what I'm doing. And I shouldn't question it any longer. No matter how long I stay here, whether it's a month, it's a year, it doesn't matter. I figure I will know when it's time for change. So I went ahead and looked up the meaning of that number 505, and it actually really rings home to what is going on, I think, right now. I'll read it to you. So the number 505 holds a deep spiritual meaning and is associated with the angel of divine love. It symbolizes major changes, important decisions and choices, endings and beginnings of cycles and phases in life, adaptability, resourcefulness, freedom, independence, courage, potential, new opportunities, and wholeness. That just hit me like a ton of bricks. It is telling me in many ways that this choice is change. It is time for things to end, for one thing, and new things to begin. And this also doesn't necessarily just represent my military mission. It also represents the business I operate, that I do all these crazy fun services, psychic and mediumship and hypnosis and energy work and regressions and all kind of fun things, among other things that I do with that business. I've had a strong desire to really get that to the point where that is all I do. And I've tried it before, full time, several occasions. It hasn't worked out for some reason, and I'm sure that there are reasons behind that, and that I needed to be doing other things first. Me coming out here even to get on this mission with the State Guard, I was retired, and I heard the direct message from my spirit guide that I needed to put the uniform back on, and I'm here doing this, and I know there's a reason for it. And I've been able to interact with lots of people, lots of my own subordinates and leaders that have been able to actually speak about things like I talk about in these podcasts, the metaphysics and the spirituality and all those things. And I have been able to interact and help other people. And that's really the goal, whether I'm making a ton of money doing it or not. The goal is to meet the people that you're supposed to meet, help the people that you're supposed to help. And so the number 505 is now holding a really interesting meaning for me rather. And I don't know who takes the time to write out all these angel numbers is really what it comes out to be. Angel number 505, where does that come from? I'm not sure. I'm sure it has to do with numerology, and in the definition it talks about the power of the 5 and the 0. Sure that there's some type of numerological equation that helps with those definitions. However, here I am, right? And so the meaning of the 5723, though, which I spoke of earlier, which is, like a 10-year-old message that keeps giving, also came back up recently. I don't know why, I don't even remember, but it came back into my mind really strong, a few days back. And so this talks about, I'll read that definition. 5723 is a number that embodies stability, growth, and progress. That's the basic meaning. Its energy is grounded yet dynamic, symbolizing the balance between stability and evolution. It reminds us that life is a constant cycle of change and transformation, and we must embrace the opportunities for growth that come our way. I don't know about you guys, but when these kind of things happen to me, it just, even though it's happened to me a lot over the years, 63, it's happened a lot. Of course, I didn't pay attention to them as much as I do now. It just blows my mind, even today, that these synchronicities can be this strong and this detailed and this prevalent and this timely. I mean, can you imagine trying to make these kind of, hardcore life decisions without any outside assistance or advice? Only your friends and your family, which, that's not going to work out well. It's just like trying to become a millionaire and listening to a thousandaire friend. Well, it's just not going to work out. And I'm not saying that your friends and your family don't have good advice, but let's just face it, the people in your life are definitely not always the best people to ask for advice. I will say, though, that I have done my fair share of reaching out, because even though I'm really good with getting information and downloads and messages and meditation journeys and putting together synchronicities, I'm still human, and I still want to make the right choice, or at least get a second opinion, third opinion sometimes. There's no shame in the game to reach out and ask people that are the right people. We're not just going to ask anybody and everybody, because everybody has an opinion. And so what I usually do anyway, this is my recommendation, is I do psychic and mediumship stuff and tarot and all those things. When you do readings for yourself, when you try to get information for yourself, it's still going through your own human filter. So I reached out to my go-to folks, the ones that I know have never really been inaccurate for me. And both the people that I reached out to, of course, said the same thing. You should be going to Austin, taking that position. But, being human, I still was fighting it in my mind anyway. And I remember bouncing it off my wife a lot, and she was real supportive. Whatever works out. But I just want to encourage you guys to really learn to pay attention, because we are being spoken to and given information all day long, every second of the day, in my opinion, even while we're sleeping. If we're not doing it during our daytime, it'll start showing up in our dreams. And if you haven't taken the time to understand your dreams, if you remember them, then you are missing out on a lot of information, a lot of guidance. The guidance that we get from outside of ourselves is really valuable, because imagine you're standing on a soccer field. I'm a soccer player, so I'm going to use that analogy. And while I'm standing on the field, I basically can pay attention to that 120 yards of field. And that's kind of my purview. But can you imagine somebody in a hot air balloon or a helicopter or an airplane above with a headset on, and you have one on, and they're like, dude, they can really see what's happening beyond the field or up the field while you're at the other end. They get a much different view, much different angle. And so they're seeing things that we can't see or we're not paying attention to. So I'm using that analogy to talk about those forces that are outside of this reality. Like I said, you call them whatever you want, angels, spirit guides, that they have a much better purview, much better view, much better overview of what is going on in our lives, and they can see things that we can't. And they also, in my opinion, have our best interest in mind, and they want us to go in the direction that we should be going. And I do believe that all of us humans are here to evolve. We're here for a reason, and I believe it's to go through this human experience. And the other day, actually, through hypnosis, one of my clients had a question for the source. This is what we connect with when I do Dolores Cannon's hypnosis technique. So it's pretty pure. It's it takes out the human part of it. But one of the questions was, is this earth a physical place? Is it really? Because how many times have you heard the arguments about flat earth, round earth, and simulation and all these things? And the answer was, it's not just a physical place. It is the most physical place in the universe. Cosmos, I forget the exact word, but they said that the source that we were connected to said it is the hardest and most intense and dense training school in the universe for souls. And those of us that come here are very brave. And sometimes we're voluntold and not volunteered to come here. You know the difference, right? Sometimes we choose to come here for an experience, other times we are directed to come here, which was the gal that I just spoke of. But the thing is that outside of us, there's so much more information. Imagine that this way, right? As a human, we experience or take in only about 1% of everything that there is possibly to experience. Like the light spectrum we can see with our eyes is even less than 1% of all that is available in the cosmos. Can you imagine how much more experience there is outside of ourselves? It's even the same for, if you look at it like as if it was the internet. The internet we have now in our current life is about 99% of it is encrypted. You call it the dark web, which has kind of gotten a bad name. As expansive and as much information as there is available to us on the internet on a daily basis that's not encrypted, not coded, not, what's the right word, password protected, is less than 1%. Imagine what 100% would be. It's the same thing for the divine cosmos, the spiritual cosmos, the everything that there is to know and experience that's out there outside of ourselves is so expansive that there's no way we could ever understand it. So when we're connecting outside of ourselves, we are tapping into the most and the best and enormous amount of information through the cosmic internet. So don't discount anything you get. Things that may seem silly and insignificant, I'm seeing 111 all day long. I'm seeing 222 all day long. I'm seeing yellow spotted butterflies with black spots. Look it up. See what it means. Perhaps it's going to give you meaning for why that's happening. Now, could we be creating those things for ourselves through our subconscious? Sure. There's a lot of explanations as to where this information is coming from. By and large, this information is coming from outside of our conscious mind, which, fortunately or unfortunately, is only about 5% of our brain capacity. So paying attention to things that are outside our conscious mind, whether you classify it as the spiritual realm or something else, it is important. So let's all learn to pay attention. Let's all learn that signs really are a thing. They are important, and they don't have to be big, huge, and humongous. They can be very tiny little things. Like I said, putting together the numbers 505 between my P.O. box and my room. That seems very small and insignificant, but based on the definitions in my decision matrix and all these things, it is very relevant, very accurate, and very comforting actually now that I've read those definitions and done research that, here I am, I now feel like I've actually made the right decision. Whether that decision was made for me or not, or by me, it doesn't matter. But I will go ahead and kind of wind this down, but I think you guys get the point. Let's do our research, let's do our work on and pay attention to what's going on around us. You will be amazed at what you're going to find and what you'll learn. As I always say, I'd really love to connect with you guys. If you go to my website, lifebymazak.com, lifebymazak.com. Look on the contact page. There's a lot of ways to reach out to me. Send me a text or some kind of message, and let's collaborate, because there are so many stories and so many things that we could all put together if we just work together. So I will now go ahead and finish this up, and I will be talking to you in the future. As always, I hope to hear from you guys and hope to work with you in the future. Stay strong and live your life.